Today I'm going to tell you the story of a woman trapped in Richmond during the final days of the Civil War and her desperate gamble for survival. Catherine Morrison hid wounded soldiers from both armies in her cellar as Union troops marched into the burning Confederate capital in April 1865. But what happened next left everyone in shock. Please subscribe to our channel and comment where you're listening. Catherine Morrison woke to the sound of explosion. They weren't the distant thunder of artillery she'd grown accustomed to over 4 years of war, but something closer, violent and immediate. The window panes rattled in their frames. Plaster dust rained from the ceiling. Richmond was burning. She threw off her blanket and rushed to the window, her heart hammering against her ribs. The pre-dawn sky glowed orange. Black smoke billowed from the direction of the James River. More explosions followed, the Confederate Navy Yard being destroyed. They were abandoning the city. "Mrs. Morrison," Martha's voice called from the elderly black woman who had stayed with Catherine, appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with fear. "They're all leaving. The government, the army, everyone. President Davis done gone in the night." Catherine had expected this day for weeks, ever since news arrived that Petersburg had fallen. Without that crucial railroad hub, Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy for nearly 4 years, could no longer be defended. "Help me get more supplies to the cellar," Catherine ordered, pulling a shawl around her shoulders, "before looters come." They worked quickly, transferring food, water, and medical supplies down the narrow stairs. The cellar was already crowded. 5 wounded men lay on makeshift pallets. 3 wore tattered Confederate gray, 2 the faded blue of Union uniforms. All had been too injured to move when their respective armies retreated or advanced. "Miss Catherine," whispered one of the Confederate soldiers, a boy no older than 18 with a festering leg wound. "Is it true? Are our boys leaving us?" She knelt beside him, checking it. "It appears so, William, but I won't leave you." She looked around at the other men. "I won't leave any of you." A Union sergeant with a chest wound struggled to sit up. "Ma'am, when the Federal troops arrive, I can vouch for you. Tell them you saved Union lives." Catherine nodded. She knew it might not be that simple. A Virginia-born woman hiding Confederate soldiers would still be charged an enemy collaborator, despite her Northern origin. And the documents hidden beneath the loose floorboard in her bedroom would complicate. The crash of breaking glass somewhere down the street startled her. The looters had begun their work. Richmond was descending into chaos before the Union Army even arrived. "I'm going upstairs to watch the street," she told Martha. "Bar the cellar door behind me." From her second-floor window, Catherine witnessed the collapse of the Confederate capital. Government officials fled with wagons piled high with documents. Civilians clogged the Mayo Bridge, desperate to escape south. Flames consumed the business district, where departing soldiers had set fire to warehouses, tobacco, and cotton to prevent them from falling into Union hands. The wind was spreading the blaze to nearby buildings. Her own home, 3 blocks from the Capitol Square, had been grand once. Her late husband, Colonel James Morrison, had brought her here as a bride in 1858. The war had consumed him, as it had consumed so much else. Missing and presumed dead at Gettysburg, James had left her alone to navigate the increasingly desperate city. A group of men broke into the house across the street, emerging minutes later with silver candlesticks and a gilt mirror. Catherine ducked back from the window, praying they wouldn't notice her home. As a precaution, she had deliberately left the front, looking abandoned for weeks, curtains drawn, dust accumulating on the porch. The day progressed in a haze of smoke and fear. Explosions continued as ammunition dumps were detonated. The roar of the fires grew louder. Richmond's own defenders had ensured its destruction rather than surrender its resources intact. By late morning, new sounds reached: disciplined marching feet, orders being shouted. Catherine peered carefully around the curtain. Union troops marched up the street, their blue uniforms a shock after 4 years of Confederate gray. At their head rode a black cavalry unit. "Martha," she called, hurrying downstairs. "They're here." The older woman's face showed conflicting emotion. Hope mingled with apprehension. Though no longer enslaved thanks to the Emancipation Proclamation, Martha had stayed with Catherine after James died, having nowhere else to go in a city. "What we gonna do about them boys downstairs?" Catherine straightened. "We tell the truth, partially." A pounding at the front door made them both jump. Catherine smoothed her hair back, adjusted her worn dress, and opened the door to find 2 Union soldiers on her porch, rifles ready. "Ma'am?" "We're securing all buildings," the older one, a sergeant with a weathered face. "Anyone else in the house?" "My housekeeper, Martha, and 5 wounded soldiers in the cellar," Catherine steadily. "2 of them are your men, rescued from a field hospital that was abandoned." The soldiers exchanged glances. "We'll need to see them." Catherine led them to the cellar. The wounded men blinked in the sudden light when she opened the door. The Union sergeant immediately recognized his comrades. "Johnson? Miller? My God, we thought you boys were dead." The wounded Union men managed a weak smile. "Nearly were, Sergeant," the one called Miller replied. "Mrs. Morrison saved us." The Union sergeant turned to Catherine with newfound respect. "You've been caring for enemy wounded alongside our own?" "They're not enemies in my cellar, Sergeant, just broken men who needed help directly. Will you help me move them somewhere safer? The fires are spreading." Before he could answer, shouts erupted out. "Fire brigade! This street needs to be cleared." The sergeant hurried upstairs, Catherine following. Through the open door she could see the inferno had jumped to buildings barely 2 blocks away. Union soldiers were organizing bucket chains while others demolished structures to create fire breaks. "We need to evacuate now. We'll send a medical wagon for the wounded." "I'm not leaving them." "Ma'am, this whole neighborhood. President Lincoln himself is expected in the city within days. We're under orders to secure—" "Lincoln? Coming here?" The news struck Catherine like a physical blow. The documents hidden under her floorboard suddenly felt like they were burning through the wood. "Yes, ma'am. Now, please, gather what you can carry. You've got 10 minutes. Catherine raced upstairs while Martha gathered food supplies. She pried up the loose floorboard and removed the oilskin packet that contained both danger and insurance, evidence of corruption that implicated officials on both sides of the conflict. Her husband had discovered it shortly before his final battle, entrusting it to her with instructions to use it only if absolutely necessary. That time might be coming. She had just tucked her skirts when a tremendous explosion knocking her to her knees. The arsenal, the largest Confederate ammunition dump, was detonated. Plaster rained from the ceiling. A support beam cracked ominously. The wounded men cried out from below. Catherine stumbled down the stairs, choking on dust. "Martha, the house is coming down." The front door burst open, and the Union sergeant reappeared with 4 more soldiers. "Out! Everyone out now!" They carried the wounded men from the cellar. As parts of the ceiling began to... Catherine grabbed her medical bag, and Martha seized a bundle of supplies. They staggered into the street as the upper floor of the house caved in behind. Richmond was an apocalyptic vision. Flames leapt from building to building. Black smoke blotted out the sun. Ash fell like gray snow. Union soldiers battled the fires while others maintained order, preventing further looting. "Head toward the Capitol," the sergeant directed them. "They're setting up aid stations there." Catherine walked beside the stretcher bearing the most severely wounded Confederate soldier, William. His young face was tight with pain and fear. "What will happen to us next, Catherine?" She took his hand, feeling the fever burning in his skin. "I don't know, William, but I'll stay with you as long as..." As they reached Capitol, Catherine looked back at the burning city, the fallen capital of a collapsing nation. Somewhere in that chaos lay the ruins of her home and the life she had known. Ahead lay uncertainty and danger, especially once the packet hidden in her skirts. The war was ending, but Catherine Morrison's fight for survival was just beginning. The Union Army had converted the Virginia state capitol into a makeshift hospital and refugee center. Hundreds of Richmond citizens, mostly women, children, and the elderly, huddled in its marble halls alongside wounded soldiers from both armies. The magnificent building that had housed the Confederate Congress now echoed with cries of pain and despair. Catherine helped settle her 5-page corner of the rotunda. Her medical skills, honed through 4 years of war, quickly drew notice from the overwhelmed Union surgeon. "You have experience." A harried Union doctor paused beside her as she cleaned William's leg wound. "My husband was a surgeon before the war. She assisted him, then worked until he died." The doctor nodded. "We need every skilled hand. If you're willing, of course." For hours, Catherine moved among the wounded, changing bandages, administering precious morphine, and assisting with surgery. Martha worked alongside her, bringing water and comforting those beyond medical. The packet of documents remained hidden in Catherine's skirts, a constant weight against her thigh. Late in the afternoon, a commotion at the entrance drew her attention. A Union officer in a pristine uniform entered, flanked by aide. The blue-coated soldiers snapped to attention. "General Weitzel," the doctor beside Catherine, "commander of the occupation forces." General Godfrey Weitzel surveyed the scene, his expression shifting between satisfaction and concern. Behind him stood a black man in civilian clothes who seemed to be advising him. "Who's that with him?" "That's Garland White, chaplain of the 28th U.S. Colored Troop. They were first into the city this morning." Catherine watched the general conferred with his subordinate, issuing orders on food distribution and fire control. Then his gaze swept the room and landed directly on her. He frowned slightly and made his way through the crowded hall. "You there?" he called. "The lady in the blue dress." Catherine stiffened, maintained her composure as he approached. "Yes, General? One of my men reports you were harboring Confederate soldiers." A ripple of attention spread around them. Several nearby Richmond women drew back, eyeing her with sudden suspicion. "I was caring for wounded men, General," Catherine replied evenly. "Some wore gray, some blue. They were abandoned by their units and would have died without medical attention." General Weitzel studied her face. "Your name, ma'am?" "Catherine Morrison. Any relation to Colonel James Morrison of the 18th Virginia?" Her heart skipped. "My husband, missing since Gettysburg." The general's expression softened slightly. "I knew James before the war. West Point, class of '52. He lowered his. "Mrs. Morrison, I'd like a private word." He guided her to a small antechamber that had once been a legislative office. Maps of Richmond now covered the fine mahogany desk. "Your husband was a good man," Weitzel said once they were, "and a formidable opponent. You've had news of him?" Hope flickered briefly before his expression extinguished. "I'm sorry, but that's partly why I needed to speak with you. There are rumors that your husband was involved in investigating corruption in the Confederate Quartermaster Department before his disappearance." Catherine's hand involuntarily moved toward the hidden path of corruption, profiteering, war supplies diverted to the black market, possibly collaboration with certain unscrupulous union contractors. His eyes narrowed. "Did he leave any documentation with you?" She chose hers carefully. "My home has just burned, General. Whatever James may have left me is likely ash now." He seemed to accept this. Doubt lingered in his eyes. "If anything should resurface, I hope you'll bring it to me directly. President Lincoln is determined to reunite. Exposing corruption on both sides would only deepen wounds that need healing. Lincoln truly intends reconciliation." Catherine couldn't keep the skepticism, even after 4 years of bloodshed. "The president will be here within the week to see Richmond himself." Weitzel moved toward the door. "I've arranged quarters for you in a home on Church Hill that survived the fires, as a courtesy to your husband's memory." Catherine recognized the offer for what it was, both generosity and surveillance. "Thank you, General, but I should stay with my patients. I've already ordered them transferred to the same location." His tone made clear it wasn't a suggestion. "A wagon will take you there at sundown." After he left, Catherine slumped against the desk. Mind, Weitzel knew, suspected, about James's investigation, which meant others might too. The documents weren't just politically sensitive. They could be deadly dangerous in a city filled with desperate people with nothing. When she returned to the rotunda, she found Martha speaking with Chaplain White. The black man's face glowed with emotion. "Mrs. Morrison," Martha called, her voice more animated than Catherine had heard in years. "This here's Chaplain White. He was born right here in Richmond. Sold south as a boy," his dignified bearing belying his humble. "Now I've returned with the U.S. Army to help free my people. The Lord works in mysterious ways." Tears shining in her, Catherine saw something pass between them, a shared understanding she could witness but never truly comprehend. "Chaplain, do you know if mail services will resume soon? I have family in Philadelphia who don't know if I'm alive or dead. Military couriers are running dispatches north already. I could include a personal letter if it's urgent." It was the opportunity she needed. If she could send the documents north to her cousin, a lawyer with political connection, they might serve as insurance against whatever was coming. That would be a great As promised, at sundown, a military wagon arrived to transport Martha. The eastern part of it largely escaped the home requisitioned Confederate treasury who had fled with the government. "You'll be comfortable here until more permanent arrangements can be made," the lieutenant in charge. "A guard will remain posted outside for your protection." For my surveillance, Catherine thought, but she smiled gratefully. That night, after ensuring her patients were settled, Catherine finally examined the documents she'd been carrying. In the privacy of her assigned bedroom, she spread the papers on the bed. James's neat handwriting filled several pages, detailing a conspiracy involving Confederate quartermaster and Union suppliers. Thousands of dollars worth of food, medicine, and ammunition diverted from both armies to be sold to the highest bidders, while soldiers starved and died. Most damning were the names: 3 Confederate cabinet officials, 2 Union generals, a northern shipping magnate, a Richmond banker, all profiting from prolonged suffering. With trembling hands, Catherine drafted 2 letters by candlelight, one to her cousin, containing only personal news and a veiled reference to expect a separate package. The second held the real message. These papers belong to James. Should anything happen to me, ensure they reach President Lincoln personally. Trust no intermediary. She had just finished when a knock at her door startled. Hastily gathering the document, she called, "Yes, Mrs. Morrison, a young youth. A gentleman to see you. Says it's urgent. At this hour?" It was nearly midnight. "Says he's an old friend of your husband." Catherine concealed the papers beneath her mattress and straightened her dress before opening the door. The soldier led her to the parlor, where a man stood with his back to her, warming his hands. When he turned, Catherine froze in the doorway. Though thinner, with streaks of gray in his once dark hair, a jagged scar across his cheek, she would have known him anywhere. "Hello, Catherine," said Colonel James, her not-so-dead husband. "I've come to collect." Catherine stared at the ghost of her husband, unable to speak. James looked older, harder. The aristocratic surgeon transformed into something dangerous. "Aren't you going to welcome me home?" he asked, his voice rougher than she remembered. "You're dead," she finally managed. "Reported killed at Gettysburg nearly 2 years ago." Not warmth. "Captured, not killed. Spent 14 months in Johnson's Island prison camp." He poured himself a glass of brandy from the decanter on the sideboard. "Escaped till summer. Been working behind enemy lines since." "Behind enemy?" Catherine struggled to comprehend. "You've been alive all this time and never sent word?" "My mission required complete secrecy." He drained the glass. "Even from you." "Your mission?" The realization dawned slowly. "You're not just an officer. You're a spy." James sat down. "I need the documents, Catherine. The ones I left with before Gettysburg." She took an instinctive step backward. "How did you find me?" "I have friends in both armies. When I heard Richmond was falling, I knew you'd try to save what you could." His eyes hardened. "Including my papers?" "The house is gone," said carefully. "Burned in the fires." "Yo, don't lie to me." He moved closer. "You'd never leave those documents behind. They're too valuable." Catherine's mind raced. The husband she'd mourned and idealized now stood before her, transformed into a stranger. "Why do you want them now? The war is practically over." "Because the information is worth a fortune to the right buyers." He reached for, "Where are they?" She jerked away. "They document corruption. They name criminals who profited from soldiers' suffering. They're my ticket to a new life. The Confederacy is finished. I need resources to start over. You intend to blackmail these men? Your own comrades?" His laugh was, "Comrades? The same men who left thousands to die in prison camp while they grew rich. Who sent soldiers into battle without food or ammunition while selling supplies on the black market?" He shook his. "They deserve whatever comes." "And what about the Union officials named in those?" Challenged. "General Weitzel asked about your investigation. He said President Lincoln wants reconciliation, not more division." James's expression shifted. "Weitzel spoke to you?" "What exactly?" Before she could answer, footsteps sounded in the hallway. The Union guard looked in. "Everything all right, ma'am?" "Fine, thank you." Maintaining her. "An old family friend with news of my husband." The soldier nodded and withdrew, but remained within earshot. James lowered his voice. "We can't talk here. Meet me tomorrow at St. John's Church, noon. Bring the document." His tone softened slightly. "Please, Catherine. Despite everything, I did what I thought was." After he left, Catherine sank onto a chair, trembling. The man she had loved and mourned was alive, but unrecognizable. The noble surgeon who had joined the Confederate cause out of loyalty to Virginia now planned to profit from the very corruption he had once invested. She couldn't. At dawn, she checked on her patients, then sought out Martha. "I need your help." Pulling the older woman into an empty room. "James is alive." Martha's eyes widened. "The Colonel? Sweet Jesus. He wants the documents he left with me, plans to use them for blackmail." "Lord have mercy." Martha shook her head. "What you gonna do?" "I don't know." Catherine pressed her hands to her temples. "He's not the man I married. War has changed him." "War changes everybody." Martha said. "Some just show it more than others." A commotion outside interrupted them. Looking through the window, they saw people lining the streets. Union cavalry cleared a path through the crowd. "What's happening?" Catherine asked a passing soldier. "President Lincoln is coming. His ship just docked at Rocket's Landing." Catherine's heart raced. Lincoln himself here in Richmond, a day earlier than expected. If she could get the documents directly to him, bypass all the corrupt officials. "I need to get to the wharf." In all this chaos, They'll never let you near the president. But Catherine was already formulating a plan. Help me prepare the medicines for our patient. I'll tell the guard I need to find more supplies. With Martha's reluctant assent, Catherine slipped away, carrying her medical bag with the precious documents hidden. Richmond was transformed from the previous day. The fires were largely extinguished. Smoke still hung in the air. Union soldiers patrolled every street, maintaining order. Most shocking were the black residents, walking openly with new purpose and dignity, many cheering the arriving Union. As Catherine approached the James River, the crowds thickened. She glimpsed a tall figure in a black coat, surrounded by sailors and officers. Abraham Lincoln himself, walking through the streets of the fallen Confederate capital. The crowd surged forward, pushing Catherine back. She would never reach him this way. Changing direction, she hurried toward the temporary Union headquarters established in the former Confederate White House, guessing Lincoln would eventually be taken there. 2 blocks from her destination, a hand grabbed her arm, pulling her into an alley. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" James demanded, his fingers digging into her flesh. "Medical supplies," trying to pull away. "Let me go." His eyes fell to her medical. "You're lying. They're in there, aren't they?" He reached for the bag. "James, please, this isn't who you are. You don't know who I am anymore." His voice was cold. 2 years in hell change a man. They struggled for the bag. Catherine's foot slipped on the muddy ground, sending her crashing against the brick wall. Pain exploded in her head. Through blurring vision, she saw James open her bag, rifling through its contents until he found the oilskin pack. "I'm sorry it came to this. When things settle, I'll send for you. We can start over somewhere. I mourned you. I defended your honor. And now you're—" Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, but it vanished quickly. "Goodbye, Catherine?" As he turned to leave, a voice called from the alley entrance. "Hold there." A Union officer stood with pistol drawn, flanked by 2 soldiers. Catherine recognized one of General Weitzel's aides, Colonel Morrison, or should I say, the Ghost, Confederate spy and saboteur. "You're under arrest." James's hand moved to seizing him. "The oilskin. You hurt, man." The document. "Not badly," though her head throbbed. Vicious. The officer opened the packet, scanning its contents with widening eyes. So the rumors were true. General Weitzel will want to see these immediately. He helped Catherine. "And you as well, Mrs. Morrison. There are many questions that need answering." As they led James away in shackles, he looked back at Catherine one last time. In his eyes he saw not the man she had married, nor the hardened spy he had become, but something in between, a soul fractured by war, like the nation itself. "What will happen to him?" she asked the officer, as they walked toward Union headquarters. "That depends on what's in these papers, and what President Lincoln decides to do with them." The former Confederate White House buzzed with activity. Union officers hurried through hallways where Jefferson Davis had walked just days before. Catherine sat in a small anteroom, a damp cloth pressed to her throbbing head, waiting to learn her fate, and James's. The door opened, and General Weitzel entered, grave. "Mrs. Morrison, how's your injury?" "I'll survive, General." She lowered the cloth. "My husband?" "Secure in custody." Weitzel sat across. "He's wanted for espionage and sabotage behind Union lines. The penalty is—" Catherine closed her. Despite everything, the words struck her like physical. "However," continued, "these documents may change things." He placed the oilskin packet on the table between them. "You've read them?" "Yes." "Then you understand their significance. They implicate highly placed officials on both sides. Men the country will need for reconstruction." He leaned forward. "President Lincoln is meeting with his advisors now to discuss them." Catherine straightened. "The president is here now? In this very building? He's especially interested in speaking with you." Before she could respond, the door opened. Catherine's breath caught as Abraham Lincoln himself stooped to enter the room. He seemed even taller than newspaper illustrations suggested, his gangly frame and deeply lined face conveying both strength and weariness. "Mrs. Morrison," the president's voice surprisingly gentle for such an imposing figure, "I hope I'm not interrupting." Catherine tried to stand, but Lincoln gestured for her to "Please, you've had quite an ordeal." "Mr. President," she managed, overwhelmed by his unexpected presence. Lincoln pulled up a chair, his knees nearly reaching his chin in the small furniture. "I've been reviewing your husband's documents. Troubling reading, to say the least." "Yes, sir?" "Tell me," Lincoln said, studying her face, "what did you intend to do with them?" Catherine considered her. "Initially, I kept them safe because after he was reported dead, when Richmond fell, I thought they should reach someone with the authority to act just, not use them for personal gain or revenge against the Confederacy. No, sir, there's been enough suffering. Those papers implicate men from both sides who profited, while others, Lincoln, that man's General Weitzel carrying warmth. Your husband, however, seems to have had different intention. The man who returned to me isn't the husband I'd quietly. War changed him, as it has changed us all. Indeed, Mrs. Morris, Lincoln sighed heavily. I've been walking these streets today, seeing the destruction, the hunger, the fear, but also hope, particularly among the freed people. This nation is an enormous healing. He tapped the document. Exposing this corruption would satisfy, but possibly at the cost of further division when we most need unity. Catherine understood the implicit, what do you intend to do? The guilty should face consequences, but perhaps not through public spectacle. Private resignation, restitution to the wounded and widowed. He looked at her directly. Your husband, he committed treason, Catherine acknowledged painfully. By the letter of the law, yes, Lincoln's expression. But I'm considering a broader amnesty for Confederate officers once peace is formally declared. Your husband's fate may depend on what you can tell us of activity. Catherine felt the weight of the moment. James's life hung in the balance, dependent on her words. Despite his betrayal, could she condemn him to death? Was captured at Gettysburg, began imprisoned at Johnson's Island. He escaped last summer and worked as a Confederate intelligence agent. That's all I know with certainty. And you had no contact with him until yesterday? None, Mr. I believed him dead like so many others. Lincoln exchanged glances with Weitzel. We'll need to question him further, of course, but your testimony helps. A knock at the door interrupted. An aide entered, whispering urgently to the president. Lincoln's face grew even more somber. I see. Thank you. He turned back to Catherine. Mrs. Morrison, it seems we have a situation. Your husband has offered to provide critical information about remaining Confederate forces in exchange for leniency. Can he be trusted? Weitzel asked. That's what I'd like Mrs. Morrison to tell us, looking at intently. Catherine thought of the man, principled, honorable, and the stranger who had returned to her. The James I knew would never betray his comrades to save him, but that man may no longer exist. Lincoln nodded gravely. Then we proceed. He rose, surprising agility his lanky frame. General Weitzel will ensure your safety and comfort. We sort this. These are difficult, but they won't. After they left, Catherine sat alone, emotionally exhausted. Through the window, she could see Union soldiers distributing food to hungry Richmond citizens, former enemies feeding those they had fought for 4 bloody years. Martha found her there an hour later. Catherine, you all right? I just met President Lincoln. Still hardly believing it. Lord above! Martha, what's going to happen? I don't know, but I think James spared Martha. And what about us? What we going to do when all this It was a question Catherine hadn't allowed her. James allowed, but forever changed. Her carefully preserved loyalty seemed misplaced. The life she had known was gone, like so much of Richmond itself. Start again, and finally. There's nothing else to do. 3 days later, Catherine stood on the portico of the Church Hill house, watching a remarkable scene. Black Richmonders gathered in Capitol Square, celebrating their freedom with prayers and songs. Nearby, Union soldiers shared rations with Confederate veterans who had straggled back to the city, defeated and starving. General Weitzel approached, being solemn. Mrs. Morrison, have news. Being transferred north for further question. The president has personally intervened to stay any immediate execution. He handed her. He left this for you. On inside was a brief note in James's familiar handwriting. Catherine, I'm sorry for what I've become. Perhaps in time you'll understand why. The man you married died at Gettysburg, even if his body lived on. Find happiness if you can. J. Will you go north to be with him? Weitzel. Catherine folded the note carefully. No, General. My place is here now. That evening, as the spring sun set over the damaged city, Catherine sat with Martha on the back steps of their temporary home. Young William, the Confederate boy she had nursed, was recovering in a room upstairs. The other wounded men had been transferred to military hospitals. Chaplain White offered me work helping freed people find their families. Says I got a gift for remembering faces and names. Except, Catherine urged her, it's important work. What about you? You going back north? Catherine looked out over Richmond, battered, but beginning to stir with new life. Union and Confederate, black and white, all facing an uncertain No, I'll stay. Richmond will need doctors, nurses, teachers. She thought of the young patients she had tended, regardless of uniform. The wounds here go deeper than bullets and shells. Those will take longer. As twilight deepened, They could hear singing from the African church nearby, voices that had been forced to whisper now raised in open jubilation. The war was... The nation, like Catherine herself, faced the painful, necessary work of rebuilding from the ashes. Richmond had fallen, but something new was rising in its place.